5% Germany tanks and all non-British artilleries and targeting on the totally constancy base. College Stores has
Maria, I'm picking up multiple contacts on an intercept course. These ships are huge, and they're not responding to standard hailing frequency.
Unknown, sir. They're metallic, massive, but they don't match any known ship configurations. They appear to be dormant.
Emergency beacon. At 15, Elena had inherited her mother's protective instincts and her father's steady hands. The girl would make an excellent colonist leader someday, maybe even qualify for the advanced terraforming programs back on Earth. The thought filled Maria with pride as she turned back to her work at the communications array. Colony Haven wasn't the largest human settlement in this sector of the galaxy, but it was certainly one of the most successful. 8,000 souls had carved out a thriving community on this distant world, transforming barren soil into fertile farmland and establishing trade relationships with 3 nearby alien species. The Miron traders brought exotic metals in exchange for human agricultural technology, while the peaceful Benth provided medical knowledge that had saved countless lives throughout the sector. The relationship with the Zolarians had always been more complicated. Dr. James Chen, the colony's xenobiologist, had warned the Council repeatedly about the Zolarian hegemony's expansionist policies. Their society was built on rigid hierarchies and the belief that superior technology gave them the right to rule over lesser species. They had been studying human transmissions for years, cataloging weaknesses and analyzing military capabilities with the cold efficiency of predators sizing up prey, but the Colony Council had believed that peaceful coexistence was possible. After all, humans had successfully established diplomatic relations with dozens of alien species across the galaxy. The Terran Diplomatic Corps had a reputation for finding common ground even with the most xenophobic civilizations. Surely the Zolarians could be reasoned with. That optimism died at exactly 11:47 local time when the sky above Colony Haven began to burn. The first indication something was wrong came from the Deep Space Monitoring Station operated by Lieutenant Commander Sarah Walsh. Her routine scan of the outer system detected massive energy signatures moving at impossible speeds toward the planet. The readings were unlike anything in the databases, showing power levels that dwarfed even the largest human battleships. "Maria, I'm picking up multiple contacts on an intercept course." Sarah's voice crackled over the communication system, tension clear despite her professional training. "These ships are huge, and they're not responding to standard hailing frequencies." Maria's fingers flew over her console, pulling up the sensor data and feeling her blood turn to ice. 7 massive vessels, each over 2 kilometers in length, were dropping out of faster-than-light travel directly above the colony. Their designs were unmistakably Zolarian, but these weren't the smaller trading vessels or diplomatic ships that occasionally passed through the system. These were warships. "All stations, this is Colony Command." Maria broadcasted on all emergency frequencies. "We have unidentified Zolarian vessels approaching. All civilians are to proceed immediately to designated shelter areas. This is not a drill." The response from the colony was swift and efficient. Years of emergency training kicked in as families gathered children and headed for the reinforced underground shelters built into every major structure. The colony's small security force, barely 30 officers armed with basic energy weapons, took defensive positions while trying to maintain hope that this was some kind of misunderstanding. Elena Santos was helping guide younger children to the school shelter when the first Zolarian transmission came through. Her mother's voice over the intercom was steady but carried an undertone of fear that made Elena's stomach clench with anxiety. "Attention, human settlement. You have 30 standard minutes to evacuate this world. Your species has been judged unsuitable for continued expansion into Zolarian territory. Resistance will be met with immediate and total annihilation." The transmission was delivered in perfect standard Galactic, the universal language used for diplomatic communication between species. But there was no emotion in the voice, no hint of negotiation or compromise. It was the tone of someone giving orders to insects. Chen was in the colony's main command center when the ultimatum arrived, his worst fears realized in the most devastating way possible. He grabbed the communications device with trembling hands and opened a channel to the Zolarian fleet. "This is Dr. James Chen, representing Colony Haven. We are peaceful civilians engaged in agricultural development and scientific research. We have committed no acts of aggression against your people or any other species. Under the Galactic Accords for the Protection of Non-Combatant Populations, we request immediate diplomatic dialogue to resolve this situation." The response came back within seconds, cold and final. "Human settlements represent a contamination vector that threatens Zolarian genetic purity and territorial integrity. Your departure from this system is required to maintain galactic stability. You have 28 minutes remaining." Maria Santos felt her world collapsing around her as she realized the horrible truth. This wasn't a territorial dispute or a misunderstanding about mining rights. The Zolarians had decided that human expansion into their region of space was an existential threat, and they intended to solve the problem with overwhelming force. But 30 minutes wasn't enough time to evacuate 8,000 people. The colony's transport ships could carry maybe 300 souls at maximum capacity, and they would need hours to make multiple trips to the orbital station where larger vessels could be summoned. Even if they started immediately, most of the colonists would still be on the surface when the deadline expired. The realization hit everyone at the same time. This wasn't an evacuation demand. It was an execution notice. In the underground shelter beneath the school, Elena Santos held a crying 6-year-old boy named Tommy while trying to maintain her own composure. The other teenagers were looking to her for guidance, their faces pale with fear as the adults moved with increasingly frantic urgency. She could hear her mother's voice over the communication system, desperately trying to coordinate some kind of response to the impossible situation. "Elena," whispered Marcus Reed, her closest friend and fellow Defense Corps member, "my dad says the transport ships can't carry everyone. What are we supposed to do?" Elena looked around at the faces of the children surrounding her, kids who had been born on this world and knew no other home. They had done nothing wrong except have the misfortune to be born human in a galaxy where some species viewed that as a crime punishable by death. "We stay together," she said firmly, her voice carrying the same steady strength that had made her a natural leader among her peers. "Whatever happens, we don't abandon each other." Above ground, the colony's leadership was making the hardest decisions of their lives. Governor Patricia Martinez called an emergency session of the senior staff, their faces grim as they reviewed options that ranged from hopeless to impossible. "The fastest ship we have would take 4 hours to reach the nearest human military outpost," reported Captain Rodriguez, the colony's chief security officer. Even if they dispatched a rescue fleet immediately, they wouldn't arrive for at least 18 hours. "What about the Miran traders?" asked Dr. Chen desperately. "Their ships are faster than ours, and they have diplomatic immunity with the Zolarians." Martinez shook her head. "I already contacted Ambassador Keth. The Moraines are terrified of Zolarian retaliation. They won't risk their own people for us." The cruel mathematics of the situation were becoming clear. 8,000 human lives hung in the balance, and there was no cavalry coming to save them. The Zolarians had chosen their timing perfectly, striking when the colony was isolated and vulnerable, but Maria Santos refused to give up. Her daughter was in one of those shelters, along with thousands of other innocent people who deserved better than to die because of some alien species' twisted philosophy of racial purity. She opened a secure channel to the emergency beacon network that connected all human settlements throughout the galaxy. "This is Colony Haven Emergency Broadcast Protocol 77 Alpha," she transmitted, using the highest priority distress code in the human colonial database. "We are under attack by Zolarian hegemony forces. 8,000 civilian lives at immediate risk. Request immediate assistance from any Terran forces in range." The response came faster than she had dared hope. Within minutes, acknowledgement signals began flooding in from across the sector. Human settlements, trading posts, exploration vessels, and military patrols all confirmed receipt of the distress call. But the nearest significant military presence was still hours away, and everyone knew it. What Maria didn't know was that her desperate transmission had been picked up by something far more dangerous than a military patrol. Hidden in the asteroid fields of a nearby system, the heavy cruiser Prometheus had been conducting classified weapons testing for the Terran Defense Force's Special Projects Division. Captain Rebecca Storm and her crew of 300 had been field testing experimental targeting systems when Colony Haven's distress signal reached them. The Prometheus was no ordinary warship. Built in the secret shipyards orbiting Jupiter, it represented the cutting edge of human military technology and carried weapons systems that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Captain Storm had been handpicked for command based on her reputation for creative tactical solutions and her willingness to bend regulations when civilian lives were at stake. "Communications, patch me through to Colony Haven," Storm ordered, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions under pressure. "This is Captain Storm of the TDF Prometheus." "Colony Haven, we have received your distress call and are moving to assist. Maintain your positions and prepare for immediate evacuation." The relief in Maria Santos's voice was palpable when the response came back. "Captain Storm, this is Colony Command. We have Zolarian warships demanding our evacuation with a 30-minute deadline. Current time mark shows 18 minutes remaining." Storm's face hardened as she processed the tactical situation. 18 minutes wasn't enough time to reach the colony, even at maximum burn. But the Prometheus had capabilities that went beyond conventional, faster-than-light travel. "All hands, battle stations," she announced over the ship's intercom. "Engineering, I need everything we've got for an emergency jump. Navigation, plot a course directly into Colony Haven's atmosphere. We're going in hot. Her executive officer, Commander David Park, looked up from his tactical display with concern. Captain, an atmospheric entry jump has never been tested with this class of vessel. The gravitational stress could tear us apart. Storm's smile was predatory as she strapped herself into the command chair. Then we'll make history, Commander, one way or another. Back on Colony Haven, the countdown to destruction continued with mechanical precision. The Zolarians had not responded to any further communication attempts, maintaining their positions in high orbit while running final targeting calculations for what they clearly intended to be a complete sterilization of the planet's surface. Elena Santos emerged from the school shelter just long enough to look up at the sky, where 7 points of light hung like malevolent stars against the afternoon sky. She could see the evacuation ships lifting off from the spaceport, carrying the few hundred souls who had managed to secure passage off-world. The rest of them would have to face whatever came next with courage and dignity. But as she watched, something extraordinary happened. The empty space between the Zolarian warships and the colony suddenly erupted in a blaze of light as reality itself seemed to tear open. The Prometheus burst through the dimensional rift like an avenging angel, its hull glowing white-hot from the stresses of emergency translation, but intact and functioning. Captain Storm's voice cut through every communication frequency in the system, carrying a message that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Zolarian vessels, this is Captain Rebecca Storm of the Terran Defense Force. You have threatened innocent human civilians and violated multiple interstellar accords regarding the protection of non-combatant populations. Power down your weapons immediately and prepare to withdraw from this system. The Zolarian response was as swift as it was arrogant. Human vessel, you are outnumbered 7-1 and have no authority in Zolarian territory. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed alongside the contamination you seek to protect. Storm's laugh was cold and terrible as she gave the order that would change everything. Let them learn what happens when you threaten human children. All weapons, fire at will. The Prometheus was not supposed to exist according to conventional military doctrine. Its experimental weapons systems drew power directly from the ship's faster-than-light drive core, creating energy outputs that defied every known law of physics. When Captain Storm gave the order to fire, the first Solarian warship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was a 2-kilometer behemoth of alien engineering. The next, it was an expanding cloud of superheated plasma that painted the orbital space in shades of orange and gold. The remaining 6 Zolarian vessels responded with coordinated precision, their massive beam weapons lashing out at the lone human ship with enough combined firepower to vaporize a small moon. But the Prometheus wasn't there anymore. Storm's tactical officer had engaged the experimental phase shift generators, allowing the ship to exist slightly outside normal space-time. The Zolarian weapons passed harmlessly through empty vacuum while the human vessel materialized directly behind their formation. Target their command ship, Storm ordered, her voice steady despite the impossible odds. Show them what happens when you threaten our people. The second Zolarian vessel died just as quickly as the first, its hull breached by weapons that converted matter directly into energy. But the aliens were learning fast, adapting their targeting systems to track the phase-shifted human vessel. The Prometheus shuddered under a barrage of return fire, its experimental shields holding but showing dangerous stress readings across all systems. Down on the colony surface, 8,000 human civilians watched in amazement and terror as their single defender faced overwhelming odds in the space above their heads. The battle was being broadcast on every available frequency, transmitted automatically by the colony's communication arrays to every human settlement within 100 light-years. Elena Santos stood with her fellow colonists outside the school shelter. Her young face turned skyward as explosions bloomed like deadly flowers against the starfield. She could see the Prometheus weaving between the massive Zolarian ships, too small and fast for their weapons to track effectively, but gradually wearing down under the accumulated damage of near misses and grazing hits. "They're fighting for us," whispered Tommy, the 6-year-old boy Elena had been protecting. His innocent observation carried a weight of truth that made every adult within hearing distance feel the burden of what was happening above their heads. Captain Storm knew her ship was dying. The experimental systems that gave the Prometheus its impossible capabilities were also its weakness, generating massive heat signatures that were slowly cooking the vessel from the inside. Her engineering crew was reporting cascade failures throughout the power grid, and the phase shift generators could only manage short bursts before requiring dangerous cooldown periods. But Storm had not survived 15 years of combat operations by giving up when the odds turned against her. She opened a channel to Colony Haven, her voice cutting through the static of battle damage with desperate urgency. "Colony Command, this is Storm. I'm transmitting our tactical logs and sensor data to your communication array. Make sure this gets out to every human settlement in the galaxy. They need to know what happened here." Maria Santos received the data package with trembling fingers, her technical training automatically cataloging the information even as her heart broke for the brave souls fighting above her world. The transmission contained detailed scans of Zalarian ship designs, weapon capabilities, and most importantly, evidence of their stated intention to eliminate human settlements throughout their claimed territory. "Captain, we're receiving your transmission," Maria responded. "But you can still win this. You've already destroyed 2 of their ships." Storm's bitter laughter echoed through the communication channel. "Mrs. Santos, I have maybe 10 minutes before my reactor goes critical. But that's enough time to send a message that the entire galaxy will understand." The captain turned to her crew, seeing the same grim determination in their faces that had carried humanity through countless wars throughout history. They all understood what she was planning, and to a person, they were ready to pay the price. "All hands, prepare for final burn," Storm announced over the ship's intercom. "We're taking as many of these bastards with us as possible." But before the Prometheus could make its final desperate attack, something impossible happened. The space around Colony Haven began to ripple with dimensional distortions as more human ships began dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Not 1 or 2 vessels, but dozens, arriving from every direction as word of the attack spread through the human communication network like wildfire. The first to arrive was the merchant vessel Aurora's Dream, a converted cargo hauler whose captain had modified his ship's engines for maximum speed after receiving Colony Haven's distress call. Behind it came the exploration ship New Horizon, the mining barge Iron Will, and the passenger liner Safe Harbor. None of them were warships, but each captain had made the same decision upon hearing that human civilians were under attack. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the Aurora's Dream," came the transmission on the emergency frequency. "We stand with Colony Haven. All human vessels coordinate your attacks and protect our people." The improvised human fleet was a study in determination over tactical sense. Cargo haulers fitted with mining lasers engaged Zalarian destroyers 10 times their size. Passenger liners used their speed and maneuverability to conduct torpedo runs against alien weapon emplacements. Even a small research vessel contributed by using its sensor array to jam Zalarian targeting systems. But the real shock came when the heavy cruiser Vengeance translated into the battle zone, followed closely by her sister ships Retribution and Justice. These were proper military vessels, part of the Terran Defense Force's 3rd Fleet, responding to the emergency beacon with the kind of firepower that could level continents. Admiral Marcus Webb commanded the small task force from the bridge of the Vengeance, his weathered face grim as he assessed the tactical situation. 3 Zalarian warships remained operational, their alien crews clearly surprised by the sudden arrival of human reinforcements. The single experimental vessel that had been holding them off was badly damaged, but still fighting, its captain apparently willing to die rather than abandon the civilians below. "All vessels, this is Admiral Webb. Form up on my position and prepare for coordinated assault. Show these aliens what happens when they threaten human colonies." The battle that followed would be remembered in human military academies for centuries to come. The Zalarians had superior individual ships and more advanced technology, but they had no answer for the sheer ferocity of human tactics when protecting their own. Human captains rammed their damaged vessels into alien hulls rather than retreat. Crews stayed at their posts even as their ships burned around them, determined to buy time for evacuation efforts. Captain Storm watched from her dying bridge as the tide of battle turned inexorably in humanity's favor. Her ship's systems were failing one by one, but she no longer needed to make the ultimate sacrifice. The cavalry had arrived in overwhelming force and the Zalarians were beginning to break. The alien formation finally collapsed when the Vengeance managed to penetrate their defensive screen and gut the Zalarian flagship with a full broadside from her main batteries. The remaining 2 enemy vessels attempted to withdraw, but human pursuit ships had already moved to cut off their escape routes. "Unknown Zalarian vessels, this is Admiral Webb," came the transmission that would echo across the galaxy. "Surrender immediately or be destroyed. You attacked innocent human civilians in violation of every civilized standard of warfare. Justice will be served." The response from the surviving Zalarian commander was filled with the kind of arrogance that had led to this disaster in the first place. "Human commander, you have interfered in legitimate Zalarian territorial expansion. Our hegemony will not tolerate this aggression." Webb's smile was cold as winter as he gave the order that would define human policy for generations to come. "Then your hegemony will learn to live with disappointment. All ships, fire." The last 2 Zalarian vessels died in brilliant pyres of light, their destruction witnessed by thousands of human civilians on the colony surface and broadcast live to every human settlement within 100 light-years. But more importantly, the battle had been recorded by automated monitoring stations throughout the sector, ensuring that every alien species in the galaxy would eventually learn what had transpired at Colony Haven. As the debris from the battle slowly cooled in the void of space, Elena Santos stood with her fellow colonists in the main square of their settlement, watching as human rescue ships landed to provide medical aid and emergency supplies. The immediate threat was over, but everyone understood that something fundamental had changed in humanity's relationship with the galaxy. Dr. James Chen was among the first to grasp the full implications of what had occurred. As the colony's xenobiologist, he understood better than most how alien species viewed human expansion into their territories. The Zolarians had not acted alone in their decision to eliminate human settlements. They had been testing the waters, probing to see how humanity would respond to direct attacks on their civilians. Now they had their answer. The rescue operations continued for 3 days as human ships arrived from across the sector to provide aid and security for Colony Haven. But more significant than the immediate relief effort was the message being transmitted from the colony's communication array to every human settlement, trading post, and military installation throughout known space. Admiral Webb had composed the transmission personally, knowing that its words would define humanity's position in galactic politics for generations to come. The message was simple, direct, and carried the weight of absolute conviction behind every syllable. To all human settlements, colonies, and installations throughout the galaxy, as of this date, any attack on human civilians by alien forces will be considered an act of war against all of humanity. We will respond with overwhelming force and complete unity of purpose. We do not seek conflict with our neighbors among the stars, but we will not tolerate threats to innocent human lives. To our alien neighbors who believe in peaceful coexistence and mutual respect, you have nothing to fear from humanity. We remain committed to diplomatic solutions and mutually beneficial relationships with all species that share our values of life and liberty. To those species that view human expansion as a threat to be eliminated, consider carefully what you witnessed at Colony Haven. 7 warships attacked 8,000 civilians and were utterly destroyed by the response of the human community. This is not a threat, but a statement of fact. Touch our people and discover the consequences. Humanity has awakened to the realities of galactic politics. We will defend our own with whatever force is necessary, whenever and wherever such defense is required. This is not negotiable. This is not subject to alien approval or disapproval. This is simply the way things are now. Message ends. The transmission was received by human colonies throughout the galaxy within hours, relayed by the fastest communication ships and emergency beacon networks that connected human civilization across thousands of light years. But more importantly, it was intercepted by alien intelligence services from dozens of species, analyzed by xenobiologists and military strategists who suddenly found themselves facing a very different human species than the one they thought they understood. On the bridge of the damaged Prometheus, Captain Storm read the Admiral's message with satisfaction as her crew conducted emergency repairs. Her ship would live to fight another day, and the sacrifice of her crew had not been necessary after all. But the lesson had been taught nonetheless. Written in the expanding debris clouds, where 7 Zolarian warships had learned the price of threatening human children. "Captain," reported her communications officer, "we're receiving priority transmissions from Terran Command. They want us to return to Jupiter Station for debriefing and analysis of our engagement data." Storm nodded thoughtfully. The experimental weapons that had made the difference in the early stages of the battle would now be mass-produced and distributed throughout the human fleet. The Zolarians had inadvertently given humanity a preview of what they could expect from alien aggression, and the response would be swift and decisive. But perhaps more important than new weapons or tactics was the psychological impact of what had occurred at Colony Haven. For the first time since humans had reached the stars, they had faced an enemy that sought their complete elimination, and they had responded not as individual settlements or competing political entities, but as a unified species determined to protect their own. The implications of that unity would ripple outward through the galaxy, like waves from a stone dropped in still water. Alien species that had viewed humans as potential prey would be forced to reconsider their assessments. Civilizations that had planned territorial expansion into human space would need to account for the possibility of facing not just local defenders, but the combined might of all human military forces. As Elena Santos helped distribute emergency supplies to families whose homes had been damaged by debris from the battle, she found herself thinking about the future of her generation. The galaxy had seemed like an infinite playground of discovery and adventure when she was younger, filled with alien friends and exotic trading partners and endless possibilities for peaceful exploration. Now she understood that the universe was a far more dangerous place than her parents' generation had wanted to admit. There were species out there that viewed humanity's very existence as a threat to be eliminated, and they would not hesitate to murder children to advance their territorial ambitions. But Elena had also seen how humanity responded to such threats. Ships had come from across the galaxy to defend her home, captains had risked their lives in vessels to protect people they had never met, and the entire human species had rallied to send a message that would echo through the stars for generations to come. The little girl who had been helping younger children just hours earlier was gone, replaced by a young woman who understood the harsh realities of galactic politics, but she was not afraid. If anything, she felt a fierce pride in her species and a determination to be worthy of the sacrifice that had been made on her behalf. In the days that followed, as Colony Haven rebuilt and prepared for the possibility of future attacks, Elena Santos began training for admission to the Terran Defense Force Academy. She would not be content to simply benefit from others' protection. She would join the ranks of those who stood guard over human civilization, ready to pay whatever price was necessary to ensure that no alien species ever again threatened innocent human lives. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's peaceful expansion had ended at Colony Haven. What came next would be something far more dangerous for any species foolish enough to mistake human compassion for human weakness. 3 months after the Colony Haven massacre, the galaxy was discovering that humans in wartime were nothing like humans at peace. The transformation had begun within hours of Admiral Webb's galaxy-wide transmission, as human colonies throughout known space started implementing emergency defense protocols that had been theoretical until the Zolarians proved they were necessary. On Earth, the sprawling metropolis of Geneva housed the Terran Defense Council, where representatives from every human world gathered in emergency session to address the new reality of galactic politics. The massive chamber buzzed with activity as military advisors, colonial governors, and industrial coordinators worked around the clock to coordinate humanity's response to alien aggression. Fleet Admiral Catherine Reyes stood before the assembled delegates, her uniform bearing the scars of 30 years of military service, and her face carrying the weight of decisions that would affect billions of lives. The holographic display behind her showed the current disposition of human forces throughout the galaxy, a complex web of defensive positions and patrol routes that had been hastily assembled in response to the Zolarian threat. "Ladies and gentlemen, the intelligence reports are unambiguous," Admiral Reyes began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustic systems. The Zolarian hegemony was not acting alone when they attacked Colony Haven. Our xenobiological analysis teams have confirmed that at least 6 other species have been coordinating territorial expansion policies specifically designed to limit human settlement rights. The reaction from the assembled delegates was immediate and intense. Governor Sarah Mitchell of the Kepler colonies stood from her seat, her face flushed with anger. "Admiral, are you telling us that there's a galactic conspiracy to eliminate human presence in these sectors? I'm telling you that several alien species view human expansion as an existential threat to their own territorial ambitions," Reyes replied grimly. "The Zolarians tested our response capabilities, and now every potential enemy in the galaxy knows exactly how we react when our civilians are threatened. The question is whether they learned the right lesson." Dr. Elena Vasquez, Earth's leading expert on alien psychology, activated her own holographic display showing detailed psychological profiles of the species in question. Based on our analysis of intercepted communications and behavioral patterns, most of these species are hierarchical societies that respect strength above all else. The destruction of the Zolarian task force at Colony Haven should have demonstrated human military capabilities quite effectively. "Should have," emphasized General Marcus Thompson, commander of the Terran Marine Corps. "But we can't assume rational actors when dealing with alien mindsets. Some of these species may interpret our defensive response as weakness rather than restraint. They might believe that humans only fight when directly attacked, which makes us vulnerable to sustained campaigns of attrition." The debate that followed would reshape human civilization for generations to come. Colonial representatives argued for immediate massive military buildup and preemptive strikes against potential threats. Industrial coordinators warned that such mobilization would cripple the civilian economy and halt the terraforming projects that had made human expansion possible in the first place. Military leaders demanded resources for new weapons research and expanded fleet construction, while diplomatic corps representatives insisted that peaceful solutions still existed if humanity approached the crisis with wisdom rather than fear. But the most compelling voice in the chamber belonged to someone who hadn't even been scheduled to speak. Elena Santos, now 18 years old and a first-year cadet at the Terran Defense Force Academy, had been invited as a representative of the Colony Haven survivors. When Admiral Reyes called on her for a statement, the young woman's words carried the moral authority of someone who had lived through the reality of alien aggression. Honored delegates, I was 15 years old when the Zalarians decided that my existence was a contamination that needed to be eliminated, Elena said, her clear voice cutting through the political rhetoric that had dominated the session. I watched alien warships prepare to murder 8,000 innocent people, including children who had been born on my world and knew no other home. The only thing that saved us was the courage of human crews who risked everything to defend people they had never met. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the chamber before continuing. But what I learned that day wasn't just that aliens might try to kill us. I learned that when humanity is threatened, we become something extraordinary. Ships came from across the galaxy to defend my home. Captains abandoned profitable trade routes to join the battle. Complete strangers died to protect my family and my friends. Elena's gaze swept across the assembled delegates, meeting the eyes of governors and admirals with the confidence of someone who had seen the best and worst of what sentient beings were capable of. The question isn't whether we should prepare for more attacks like Colony Haven. The question is whether we're going to wait for alien species to test us again, or whether we're going to make it clear that the first test was also the last one. The vote that followed was not even close. By a margin of 847-23, the Terran Defense Council authorized the largest military mobilization in human history. The Industrial Coordination Act was passed within hours, converting civilian manufacturing facilities throughout human space to military production. The Colonial Defense Mandate established mandatory militia training for all human settlements beyond the Sol system. Most significantly, the Alien Threat Assessment Protocol authorized the creation of deep space reconnaissance fleets tasked with monitoring potential enemy movements throughout the galaxy. But the most controversial decision was the activation of Project Prometheus, the classified weapons research program that had produced Captain Storm's experimental cruiser. The surviving data from the Colony Haven engagement had proven the effectiveness of the new technologies, and human engineers were working around the clock to mass-produce weapons systems that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Dr. Michael Chen, the lead physicist for Project Prometheus, briefed the assembled delegates on the implications of the new weapons technology. The phase shift generators that allowed the Prometheus to survive the initial engagement can be installed on any ship larger than a destroyer. The energy-to-matter conversion weapons are more complex, but we can have the first production models ready for fleet installation within 6 months. Admiral Reyes leaned forward in her chair, studying the technical specifications with the eye of someone who understood the tactical implications. Doctor, how many ships can we retrofit with this technology? With full industrial mobilization, we can upgrade approximately 300 vessels per year, Chen replied. But the real advantage isn't in individual ship capabilities. These weapons draw their power from the ship's faster-than-light drive core, which means they can only be used effectively by species that have mastered dimensional fold technology. As far as we know, humans are the only species in the galaxy with that level of understanding. The implications were staggering. Humanity had stumbled upon a weapons technology that was uniquely suited to their own faster-than-light drive systems, giving them a potential military advantage that no alien species could duplicate. But that advantage would only last as long as the technology remained secret, and the Zellerarians had already had 3 months to analyze the debris from their destroyed warships. The mobilization that followed dwarfed anything seen in human history. Entire asteroid belts were converted into shipyards as humanity's industrial capacity shifted from peaceful expansion to military preparation. The orbital factories around Jupiter worked around the clock to produce hull plating and drive components, while the research stations near Saturn focused on weapons development and defensive systems. But perhaps more significant than the industrial changes were the social transformations taking place throughout human space. The casual optimism that had characterized human expansion into the galaxy was replaced by a harder, more pragmatic worldview that recognized the universe as a fundamentally hostile environment. Children who had grown up hearing stories of peaceful first contact with alien species now trained with emergency weapons and practiced evacuation drills. Elena Santos exemplified this transformation as she progressed through her accelerated training at the Defense Force Academy. Her instructors recognized the unique perspective she brought to military theory, having experienced alien aggression firsthand while still maintaining her commitment to protecting innocent life. She excelled in tactical planning and xenobiological studies, but her real strength lay in her ability to understand the moral dimensions of interstellar warfare. The key to understanding alien psychology, Elena explained to her fellow cadets during a strategic planning exercise, is recognizing that most species see warfare as an extension of territorial competition. They attack when they believe the benefits outweigh the costs, and they retreat when the equation changes. Our job is to make sure the costs are always too high. Her analysis was being proven correct throughout human space as reports came in of alien probe ships testing human defensive responses. The Moran Confederacy, which had been neutral during the Colony Haven crisis, was now conducting suspicious surveys of human mining operations in the Outer Rim territories. The Benth Medical Collective had quietly terminated several research partnerships with human colonies, citing philosophical differences that hadn't existed 6 months earlier. Most concerning were the reports from the corporate sector, where human trading posts were reporting increased harassment from Zalarian customs inspections and navigation safety checks that seemed designed to map human shipping routes and cargo manifests. The Zalarian hegemony was clearly preparing for expanded operations, despite having lost 7 warships in their previous attempt to intimidate human settlements. Admiral Reyes called another emergency session of the Defense Council as the intelligence reports painted an increasingly disturbing picture of alien intentions. "The pattern is clear," she informed the assembled delegates. "Multiple species are probing our defenses and attempting to gather intelligence on our military capabilities. They're preparing for coordinated action." Governor Mitchell raised her hand for recognition. "Admiral, what's your assessment of our current defensive posture? Can we protect all human settlements if these species decide to launch simultaneous attacks?" The answer was sobering. Despite the massive mobilization effort, humanity was still spread too thin across too many worlds to provide comprehensive protection for every settlement. The mathematics of interstellar defense were unforgiving. Enemy fleets could strike at any target they chose, while human forces had to defend everywhere simultaneously. "Our current strategy assumes that we can respond to attacks after they begin," Admiral Reyes explained. "But if multiple species coordinate their efforts, we could face simultaneous crises on dozens of worlds. We need to fundamentally change our approach to galactic security." The solution that emerged from the emergency sessions would have been unthinkable just months earlier. Defense doctrine authorized human military forces to take action against alien fleets before they reached human space, based on intelligence assessments of hostile intent. It was a radical departure from humanity's traditionally defensive posture, but the lesson of Colony Haven was clear. Waiting for enemies to attack first was a luxury that could cost thousands of innocent lives. The first test of the new doctrine came just 6 weeks later, when long-range reconnaissance detected a massive Zalarian fleet assembling in the outer system of Arcturus Prime. The intelligence analysis suggested preparation for a major offensive operation, with target probabilities indicating human settlements throughout the Outer Rim. Admiral Reyes didn't wait for the Zalarians to complete their preparations. Task Force Prometheus, consisting of 23 ships equipped with the new experimental weapons, translated into the Arcturus system with orders to destroy the enemy fleet before it could threaten human civilians. The battle was brief and decisive. The Zalarian commanders had been expecting to face the same defensive tactics they had encountered at Colony Haven, but Task Force Prometheus attacked with the kind of overwhelming preemptive force that left no room for tactical adaptation. 42 alien warships were destroyed in less than 30 minutes, with no human casualties and minimal damage to the attacking fleet. But more important than the tactical victory was the message it sent to every alien species monitoring human activities throughout the galaxy. Humanity was no longer content to react to threats after they materialized. They would seek out and destroy enemy forces wherever they assembled, using weapons technology that no other species could match or counter. The psychological impact on potential enemies was immediate and profound. Several species that had been planning military actions against human settlements quietly canceled their operations and recalled their fleets to defensive positions. The Miran Confederacy formally apologized for their misunderstanding regarding human territorial rights and offered generous trade concessions to restore diplomatic relations. But the most significant response came from an unexpected source: the Quantum Collective, one of the oldest and most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, requested formal diplomatic contact with the Terran Defense Council. Their message was brief but carried implications that would reshape galactic politics for centuries to come. To the representatives of human civilization, the Quantum Collective has observed your species' recent military activities with great interest. We believe the time has come for substantive dialogue regarding humanity's role in galactic affairs. We propose a meeting at neutral coordinates to discuss matters of mutual concern. Elena Santos read the message during her Advanced Strategic Studies class, her mind immediately grasping the implications. The Quantum Collective had never shown interest in human affairs before, treating humanity like an insignificant curiosity on the edges of galactic civilization. Their sudden desire for formal diplomatic contact suggested that something fundamental had changed in how they viewed human military capabilities. "This isn't an invitation," she told her instructor, Commander Patricia Hayes. "This is a job interview. They want to determine whether humanity is ready to join the major powers of the galaxy, or whether we're still just an ambitious minor species that got lucky with new weapons technology." Commander Hayes nodded approvingly at the analysis. What would you recommend as an appropriate response, Cadet Santos? Elena considered the question carefully, weighing the diplomatic opportunities against the potential risks of revealing too much about human capabilities and intentions. We accept the meeting, but we do it on our terms. No neutral coordinates. They come to us, to a location where they can see exactly what human civilization is capable of. Let them evaluate our industrial capacity, our military readiness, and our unity of purpose. If they're going to judge us, make sure they have all the facts. The recommendation would eventually reach Admiral Reyes and the Defense Council, where it would be debated and refined before becoming official Terran policy. But the essential insight remained sound. Humanity was no longer petitioning for acceptance in galactic affairs. They were announcing their arrival as a major power with the strength to defend their interests and the wisdom to use that strength responsibly. The galaxy was about to discover that the species they had dismissed as primitive newcomers had become something far more dangerous and far more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. The meeting with the Quantum Collective took place at Luna Station, humanity's most advanced orbital facility orbiting Earth's moon. The choice of location was deliberate and symbolic, showcasing the jewel of human engineering while positioning the diplomatic encounter literally in the shadow of humanity's homeworld. Admiral Reyes had chosen the venue based on Elena Santos's recommendation, understanding that first impressions would determine the trajectory of humanity's relationship with the galaxy's most ancient civilization. Ambassador Vothka of the Quantum Collective arrived aboard a vessel that defied conventional understanding of physics, its crystalline hull seeming to exist in several dimensions simultaneously. The Collective's representative was equally alien, a being of pure energy contained within a complex framework of exotic matter that allowed interaction with conventional spacetime. To human observers, Vothka appeared as a shifting pattern of light and thought that communicated through direct neural interface rather than vocal speech. Elena Santos, now a junior officer serving as part of Admiral Reyes' diplomatic security detail, stood at attention as the alien ambassador materialized in Luna Station's central conference chamber. Her 3 years of accelerated training had prepared her for this moment, but nothing could have prepared her for the sheer otherworldly presence of a being whose species had been traveling the stars when humanity was still discovering fire. Ambassador Vothka, Admiral Reyes greeted the alien representative with careful formality. Welcome to Luna Station. We are honored by the Quantum Collective's interest in establishing formal diplomatic relations with humanity. The response came not as words, but as concepts flowing directly into the minds of everyone present, carrying layers of meaning that human language couldn't adequately express. The essential message was clear. The Collective had been watching humanity's development with growing concern, and recent events had forced them to reconsider their policy of non-interference in the affairs of younger species. Your species has demonstrated military capabilities that concern the established powers of this galaxy, Vothka communicated, the thoughts carrying undertones of both respect and warning. The weapons technology displayed at Colony Haven and Arcturus Prime represents a fundamental shift in the balance of power that has maintained galactic stability for millennia. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now serving as humanity's chief xenobiological advisor, leaned forward with interest. Ambassador, are you suggesting that our defensive responses to unprovoked aggression have somehow destabilized galactic politics? The alien's response carried what could only be interpreted as amusement. Dr. Vasquez, what you call defensive responses, others call the emergence of a new apex predator. Your species has transitioned from prey to hunter in less than 1 galactic standard year. Such rapid changes typically result in widespread conflict as existing power structures adapt to new realities. Elena Santos felt a chill of understanding as the implications became clear. Humanity's military mobilization hadn't just protected their colonies from alien aggression. It had fundamentally altered the galactic balance of power. Species that had previously dominated their regions of space now faced the possibility of human intervention if they threatened smaller civilizations. The protective instincts that had driven humanity to defend Colony Haven were being interpreted by alien powers as a claim to galactic hegemony. Admiral Reyes maintained her diplomatic composure despite the gravity of the situation. Ambassador, humanity has no interest in galactic conquest or hegemony. Our military actions have been purely defensive, designed to protect innocent civilians from unprovoked aggression. We remain committed to peaceful coexistence with all species that share those values. Yet your actions speak louder than your words, Vothka replied, projecting images directly into their minds showing the deployment of human military forces throughout the galaxy. Task Force Prometheus destroyed 42 Zalarian vessels in what your military called a preemptive defensive action. The Miran Confederacy has withdrawn from 3-star systems rather than risk confrontation with human patrols. The Benth Medical Collective has terminated research partnerships and recalled their citizens from human space. The accusations were accurate but incomplete, lacking the crucial context of alien aggression that had prompted human military responses. Elena Santos found herself thinking about the children of Colony Haven, innocent victims who would have been murdered if humanity had continued to rely on diplomatic solutions to existential threats. "With respect, Ambassador," Elena interjected, knowing she was taking a significant risk by speaking without invitation, "you're describing the symptoms without acknowledging the disease. Alien species attacked our civilians first. They chose violence over diplomacy, and they learned that humanity will not tolerate threats to innocent lives. If that creates instability in galactic politics, perhaps the previous stability was built on the assumption that smaller species could be bullied with impunity." The silence that followed Elena's words was profound, as both human and alien representatives processed the implications of her challenge. She had essentially accused the galaxy's oldest civilization of maintaining order through the implicit threat of force against weaker species, while portraying humanity's military responses as moral imperatives rather than political choices. Vodka's response carried new tones of evaluation, as if the alien ambassador was reassessing the humans based on this unexpected display of philosophical courage. "Young officer, your analysis contains elements of truth that the collective has perhaps preferred not to acknowledge. The previous galactic order did indeed rely on the assumption that emerging species would accept their assigned roles in the established hierarchy." Dr. Vasquez seized the opening to press humanity's case. "Ambassador, if the Quantum Collective is concerned about galactic stability, perhaps they should consider supporting a new kind of order based on mutual respect rather than hierarchical dominance. Humanity has proven that we will defend ourselves and others against aggression, but we have also demonstrated restraint and proportional response. The alien's mental voice carried what might have been approval. Indeed, your species has shown remarkable discipline in the application of overwhelming force. Lesser civilizations would have used their technological advantages to establish tributary relationships with neighboring species. Instead, humanity continues to offer equal partnerships and mutual defense agreements." Admiral Reyes recognized the shift in the conversation's tone and moved to capitalize on the momentum. "Ambassador, what would the Quantum Collective require to support humanity's position in galactic affairs?" "We're prepared to accept responsibilities commensurate with our capabilities." The response came with startling directness. "The Collective proposes a formal alliance between our civilizations, with humanity serving as the primary military component of a new galactic order based on protection rather than exploitation. Your species would assume responsibility for maintaining peace throughout this sector of the galaxy, while the Collective provides technological and scientific support." Elena Santos felt her breath catch as she realized the magnitude of what was being offered. The Quantum Collective wasn't just proposing diplomatic recognition, they were offering to sponsor humanity's emergence as a galactic superpower with all the rights and responsibilities that such status would entail. But the proposal also carried enormous risks. Accepting the Collective's alliance would make humanity the enforcers of galactic law throughout their region of space, inevitably bringing them into conflict with species that preferred the old order of territorial exploitation and hierarchical dominance. Human military forces would be called upon to protect alien civilizations that couldn't defend themselves, potentially stretching human resources across hundreds of star systems. "Admiral," Elena said quietly, "this isn't just an alliance proposal. They're offering us stewardship of galactic civilization in this entire sector. The question is whether humanity is ready for that kind of responsibility." Admiral Reyes nodded thoughtfully, understanding that the decision would determine the trajectory of human civilization for centuries to come. The choice wasn't between war and peace. Recent events had proven that conflict was inevitable as humanity's presence in the galaxy continued to grow. The choice was between accepting formal responsibility for galactic order or allowing that responsibility to default to species that viewed warfare as a tool of territorial expansion. "Ambassador Vothka," Admiral Reyes said after a long moment of consideration, "humanity would be honored to accept the Collective's proposal, subject to ratification by the Terran Defense Council and formal agreement on the terms and limitations of our respective responsibilities." The alien's approval was palpable, communicated through emotional resonances that transcended language barriers. "Admiral Reyes, the Collective has monitored your species for decades, waiting for evidence that humanity possessed both the strength to maintain order and the wisdom to use that strength responsibly. The events at Colony Haven provided that evidence." Dr. Vasquez leaned back in her chair, her mind racing through the implications of what they had just negotiated. Ambassador, there are dozens of species throughout this sector that have been planning military action against human settlements. How do you propose we handle existing threats while establishing this new galactic order? The Collective will transmit formal notification to all major powers that humanity now operates under our protection and sponsorship, Vothka replied. Species that continue aggressive actions against human interests will face the combined response of both our civilizations. Most will choose to pursue diplomatic solutions rather than risk such confrontation. Elena Santos recognized the elegant solution hidden within the ambassador's words. The Quantum Collective's endorsement would serve as both shield and sword for humanity, providing legitimacy for human military actions while deterring potential enemies who understood the Collective's true capabilities. But the conversation was far from over. The practical details of implementing such a revolutionary change in galactic politics would require months of negotiation and careful planning. Human military forces would need to be restructured from a defensive organization to a galactic peacekeeping force. Colonial governments would need to prepare for their new roles as protectors of smaller alien civilizations. Most significantly, humanity would need to develop new diplomatic and legal frameworks for managing interstellar conflicts without simply resorting to military solutions. The meeting continued for 6 hours as human and alien representatives worked through the complex details of their proposed alliance. Maps were displayed showing the territorial boundaries of humanity's new sphere of responsibility. Military protocols were discussed for responding to aggression against protected civilizations. Economic frameworks were established for supporting the massive infrastructure required to maintain peace across hundreds of star systems. Throughout the discussions, Elena Santos found herself thinking about the children of Colony Haven and the thousands of other innocent lives that had been saved by humanity's willingness to fight for their protection. The alliance with the Quantum Collective would formalize and expand that protective mission, making humanity the shield that stood between predatory species and the civilizations they sought to exploit. As the formal negotiations concluded, Ambassador Vothka made one final observation that would echo through human consciousness for generations to come. Admiral Reyes, your species has achieved something remarkable in galactic history. Most civilizations that acquire sufficient military power use that power to dominate their neighbors. Humanity has chosen to use its strength to protect the innocent, even when those innocents are not human. This is why the Collective believes your species is ready for the responsibilities we offer. The transmission ended with formal documentation of the alliance terms, encrypted in quantum-locked protocols that would be transmitted to the highest levels of both civilizations. But more importantly, the meeting had established the philosophical foundation for humanity's role in galactic affairs. Elena Santos stood at attention as Ambassador Vothka prepared to depart, her mind already turning to the immense challenges that lay ahead. Humanity would need to expand its military forces by orders of magnitude while maintaining the moral clarity that had earned the Collective's respect. Human diplomats would need to master the complex politics of dozens of alien species while preserving their commitment to protecting innocent life. Most importantly, humanity would need to prove worthy of the trust that had been placed in them. The galaxy's oldest and most advanced civilization had essentially handed them the keys to galactic order, believing that humans possessed the unique combination of strength and wisdom required to build a better universe. As the alien ambassador's ship departed Luna Station, Elena Santos reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 3 years earlier, she had been a teenage girl helping younger children reach safety, while alien warships prepared to murder everyone she had ever loved. Now she was witnessing the birth of a new galactic order that would ensure no other children would face such terror. The transformation of humanity from victims to protectors was complete. What remained was to prove that they could bear the weight of the responsibility they had accepted, and to build the kind of universe where strength served justice rather than conquest. 5 years after the Colony Haven massacre, Admiral Elena Santos stood on the bridge of the Righteous Fury, the flagship of the Terran peacekeeping fleet, watching the final moments of the Caliban siege. The aggressive reptilian species had spent 6 months systematically bombarding the peaceful Nuru homeworld, believing that their advanced weaponry and numerical superiority would allow them to claim the resource-rich planet without interference from the galactic community. They had been catastrophically wrong. The Terran response to the Caliban aggression exemplified everything that humanity had become in the years since their alliance with the Quantum Collective. 3 full battle groups had translated into the Nuru system within hours of the distress call, bringing overwhelming firepower to bear against the Caliban siege fleet. But more importantly, the human forces had brought something the galaxy had never seen before, a comprehensive plan for post-conflict reconstruction and reconciliation. Admiral, reported Commander Marcus Chen, Elena's tactical officer and descendant of the Colony Haven xenobiologist who had warned about Zilarian intentions years earlier. The last Caliban vessels are signaling surrender. Their remaining fleet commanders are requesting terms for cessation of hostilities. Elena nodded, her expression carrying the weight of decisions that would affect billions of lives across multiple star systems. At 26 years old, she was the youngest flag officer in Terran military history, promoted based on her unique understanding of both alien psychology and the moral imperatives that drove human peacekeeping operations. Her rapid rise through the ranks had been fueled by a combination of tactical brilliance and an unwavering commitment to the principles that had emerged from the ashes of Colony Haven. "Open a channel to the Caliban commanders," Elena ordered, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had learned to wield power responsibly. "All frequencies, standard diplomatic protocols." The response came within seconds, the Caliban fleet commander's voice crackling with defeated anger and confusion. "Human Admiral, our surrender is offered in accordance with galactic military tradition. We request safe passage for our surviving vessels and personnel in exchange for cessation of aggressive operations against the Nuru homeworld." Elena's response would be studied in diplomatic academies throughout the galaxy for decades to come. "Caliban Commander, your surrender is accepted, but safe passage is contingent upon acceptance of comprehensive reparations for the damage inflicted upon Nuru civilization. Your species will provide material compensation for the cities you destroyed and technological assistance for the reconstruction of damaged infrastructure. Additionally, Caliban military forces will be restructured under Terran supervision to prevent future aggressive actions against peaceful species." The silence that followed spoke volumes about how dramatically galactic politics had changed since humanity's emergence as the sector's dominant military power. The old order had operated on simple principles of conquest and tribute, with defeated species either destroyed or absorbed into the victor's hierarchy. Humanity had introduced the radical concept of justice tempered by mercy, holding aggressors accountable for their actions while providing pathways for redemption and peaceful reintegration into galactic society. "Admiral Santos," came the eventual reply from the Caliban commander, his tone suggesting a mixture of resignation and grudging respect. "Your terms are acceptable. The Caliban Confederacy agrees to your conditions for post-conflict reconstruction." As the formal surrender negotiations began, Elena found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought humanity to this moment of unprecedented galactic influence. The alliance with the Quantum Collective had provided legitimacy and technological support, but it was humanity's own moral evolution that had made their peacekeeping mission successful. The Bridge of the Righteous Fury reflected this evolution in its design and crew composition. Human officers worked alongside alien specialists from dozens of species, creating a truly integrated command structure that drew on the best capabilities of multiple civilizations. Dr. Vex Than, a reformed Zilarian scientist who had defected to human service after witnessing the brutality of his own species' policies, served as the ship's xenobiological advisor. Lieutenant Kira Shen, a brilliant young officer whose parents had been among the Colony Haven survivors, coordinated intelligence operations with a team that included former enemies who had come to respect humanity's approach to conflict resolution. "Admiral," Vex Than, his translated voice carrying the distinctive harmonic patterns of his species. "Long-range sensors are detecting massive refugee movements from the outer Caliban territories. It appears that news of their defeat has triggered uprisings among the subject species that they had conquered over the past century." Elena smiled grimly at the intelligence. This was another aspect of the new galactic order that humanity had established. The liberation of oppressed populations didn't end with military victory over their oppressors. The Terran peacekeeping fleet maintained specialized humanitarian divisions that provided relief assistance to freed populations while helping them establish stable independent governments. "Signal the relief convoy to begin humanitarian operations immediately," Elena ordered. "I want medical teams and reconstruction specialists deployed to all affected systems within 48 hours. Show these people that freedom means more than just the absence of oppression." The operations that followed showcased the full scope of humanity's transformation from defensive colonists to galactic peacekeepers. Hospital ships provided emergency medical care to populations that had been deliberately starved by Caliban occupation forces. Engineering vessels began restoring infrastructure that had been stripped away to feed the Caliban war machine. Most importantly, diplomatic teams worked with local leaders to establish constitutional frameworks that would prevent future exploitation by any species, including humanity itself. Commander Chen watched the deployment with admiration for the comprehensive nature of human peacekeeping doctrine. "Admiral, the efficiency of these operations is remarkable. 5 years ago, we were struggling to protect a single colony from alien aggression. Now we're capable of liberating and reconstructing entire star systems. Elena nodded thoughtfully, but her expression carried the weight of someone who understood the enormous responsibilities that came with such power. Marcus, the easy part is winning the military victory. The hard part is proving worthy of the trust that these liberated populations place in us. Every decision we make here will determine whether humanity is remembered as liberators or as just another set of conquerors with better public relations. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Quantum Collective's liaison aboard the flagship. Ambassador Sectol, a being of pure consciousness similar to Vothka, but specialized in military affairs, manifested in the bridge's central command area with news that would test humanity's peacekeeping capabilities to their limits. Admiral Santos, the alien ambassador, communicated through direct neural interface. The collective has detected massive fleet movements in the Scorpion Nebula. Intelligence analysis suggests that the Hegemony Alliance is preparing a coordinated response to humanity's peacekeeping operations. Elena felt her blood turn cold at the implications. The Hegemony Alliance was a coalition of aggressive species that had dominated galactic politics for millennia through the simple expedient of overwhelming force applied without moral restraint. Their member species included the surviving Zalarian fleets, the Vorath Empire, the Kresh Dominion, and at least 6 other civilizations that viewed humanity's peacekeeping mission as an existential threat to their way of life. Ambassador, what's your assessment of their probable objectives? Elena asked, her mind already shifting into the tactical planning mode that had made her reputation throughout the fleet. The Alliance appears to be planning a 3-pronged assault designed to demonstrate humanity's inability to maintain galactic order, Sectol replied, projecting strategic analyses directly into the minds of the bridge crew. Simultaneous attacks on human protectorate worlds in the Outer Rim, combined with targeted strikes against Terran military installations and a direct assault on one of your major colonial centers. Dr. Vex then studied the projected attack patterns with the expertise of someone who understood aggressive military doctrine from personal experience. Admiral, this strategy is designed to force humanity into an impossible choice. We cannot defend everywhere simultaneously, which means we must either abandon some populations to enemy attack or spread our forces so thin that we're vulnerable to defeat in detail. Elena Santos felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders as she realized that the next few hours would determine the future of galactic civilization. The Hegemony Alliance was preparing to test whether humanity's peacekeeping mission was built on sustainable foundations or whether it was simply an ambitious experiment that would collapse under the pressure of coordinated opposition. But Elena had learned valuable lessons during her years of service, both from human experience and from the wisdom of allied alien species. The key to defeating overwhelming odds was not to match enemy strength with equal strength, but to fundamentally change the nature of the conflict itself. All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Santos. She broadcast on the priority command frequency that linked every major Terran military installation throughout the galaxy. We have intelligence indicating imminent large-scale aggression by the Hegemony Alliance. Initiate Protocol 7 immediately. Protocol 7 had been developed in close cooperation with the Quantum Collective as humanity's ultimate response to existential threats against galactic peace. Rather than attempting to defend everywhere simultaneously, it called for coordinated, preemptive strikes against enemy staging areas, combined with massive humanitarian aid to populations that would be caught in the crossfire. Within hours, the largest military operation in galactic history was underway. 500 Terran warships, supported by allied vessels from 24 species that had benefited from human protection, began translating toward enemy strongholds throughout the galaxy. But more significantly, twice as many relief ships moved towards civilian populations in contested areas, offering evacuation, medical aid, and protection to anyone who requested assistance regardless of their species or political affiliation. The Hegemony Alliance had expected to face a defensive opponent constrained by the need to protect static installations. Instead, they found themselves confronting a mobile force that treated the protection of innocent life as its highest priority while systematically dismantling the infrastructure that supported aggressive military operations. The Battle of the Scorpion Nebula would be remembered as the moment when humanity's vision of galactic order finally triumphed over the ancient philosophy of conquest through superior force. Admiral Santos personally led the assault on the Alliance's Central Command facility, her fleet destroying a 1,000-year-old fortress that had served as the coordination center for aggressive operations throughout the galaxy. But the real victory came in the aftermath, when human relief operations provided aid to Alliance civilians who had been abandoned by their own governments during the retreat. Millions of Zalarian, Vorath, and Kresh non-combatants received emergency medical care, food supplies, and transportation to safe zones established under Terran protection. Elena Santos stood on the bridge of the Righteous Fury as reports came in from across the galaxy, documenting the collapse of the Hegemony Alliance and the emergence of new governments committed to peaceful cooperation rather than territorial expansion. The transformation was not complete. Several species continued to resist the new order through guerrilla tactics and terrorist operations, but the fundamental balance of power had shifted irreversibly in favor of civilizations that respected the rights of others. "Admiral," reported Commander Chen with barely contained excitement, "we're receiving formal requests for Terran Protectorate status from 37 different species. They're asking for our guarantee of protection against future aggression and assistance in establishing stable democratic governments." Elena smiled at the news, but her expression carried the weight of someone who understood the enormous challenges that lay ahead. Protecting 37 different species across hundreds of star systems would require resources and capabilities that stretched even humanity's expanded industrial base. More importantly, it would require maintaining the moral clarity that had earned these civilizations trust in the first place. "Signal the Terran Defense Council and request authorization for the next phase of fleet expansion," Elena ordered. "If we're going to accept responsibility for protecting these populations, we need to do it properly." As the Righteous Fury began its return journey to Earth, Elena Santos reflected on the transformation that had brought humanity from the desperate defenders of Colony Haven to the acknowledged guardians of galactic peace. The journey had cost thousands of human lives and required sacrifices that previous generations could never have imagined, but it had also proven that a species committed to protecting the innocent could build something better than the endless cycle of conquest and exploitation that had dominated galactic politics for millennia. The galaxy was finally safe for children like Elena had once been, growing up on distant worlds with the confidence that if danger threatened, help would come from among the stars. Human ships bearing names like Colony's Revenge, Remember Haven, and Righteous Fury patrolled the space lanes, ensuring that no species would ever again face the choice between surrender and annihilation. Elena Santos had kept the promise she made to herself in the shelters beneath Colony Haven, that no other children would face the terror she had experienced as alien warships prepared to murder everyone she loved. The price of that promise had been the transformation of humanity into something they had never intended to become, the guardians of galactic civilization. But looking out at the stars that now lay under human protection, Elena Santos knew that some promises were worth any sacrifice required to keep them. The galaxy had learned what happened when you touched human children, and that lesson would echo through the cosmos for as long as humanity existed among the stars.